that it benefits the individual, in a roundabout way, it comes back and pays dividends to the command. So I appreciate the support, and thank you for letting us know all those wonderful resources.
Perfect, thank you. Happy Friday.
So if you didn't know, this is the next guy, Mr. Toshkov, who's from NCIS, who's going to give us a brief. So give him a round of applause.
Thank you, guys. I'm glad you guys are awake. Who does not know who NCIS are and what we do? Everyone's watched all our TV shows, right? All 17 of them, right? So, thank you again for the introduction. My name is Tom Toshkov. I'm a special agent with NCIS. I've been with NCIS for about 5 years now. I spent 3.5 years down at Pax River doing general crimes, and now I'm covering NAVC, headquarters of the Navy Yard. And I covered Carter Rock for about 8 months or so. So this presentation is mainly going to be counterintelligence related. So if you have any questions, let me know. Just stop me, raise your hand, whatever, and we'll kind of go from there. So again, NCIS, primary law enforcement for general crimes, right? Navy and Marine Corps installations. For the counterintelligence side, I'm going to walk through some of that stuff. So, and I can't do that, right, without giving you a definition. So I'm not going to expect everyone, I'm not going to read through all these slides, but I think it's important to cover at least what the insider threat definition is, right? So insider who uses his or her access wittingly or unwittingly to harm national security interests or national security through unauthorized disclosure, data modification, espionage, and terrorism. I think two of the words that I think are most important to kind of keep in mind, to keep track of while we go through the presentation is witting or unwitting, right? We've all watched these movies out there, right? Spy movies with everyone just kind of running around and doing, committing espionage, right? But there is an unwitting participant to a lot of these, and I'll talk a little bit about that in some of the next slides. I'm not going to talk too much about terrorism. We do have folks that specifically sit with the Bureau, the FBI, at the Joint Terrorism Task Force. So if there is anything that you guys want to let me know about, I can put you in contact, or I can go direct with those folks.
Everybody's there at the
Yep. Go to the next slide, please. So again, keep in mind, next slide, please. Witting or unwitting participant. Slide's not working? There we go. Fees, right? Types of threats. Fees, foreign intelligence entities, kind of go hand in hand with espionage, terrorism, self-radicalization, workplace violence, right? I won't talk too much about terrorism or self-radicalization. I think it's more important to go through some of the behavioral clues to look out for, and I'll call them red flags. But again, workplace violence, obviously nobody wants to come to work and experience any sort of event. While something is happening, right, whether it's some sort of workplace violence event, a terrorist event, or a person who's radicalized, right, you don't know in that moment, or even an active shooter, right, you don't know in that moment what's going on. We only really find out days, weeks, or whatever months later, right? So I think it's important to hone down on those behavioral cues when somebody is exhibiting, right? Next slide, please. So, what is a fee? Foreign organization, person, or group that conducts intelligence activities to acquire U.S. information, block, or impair U.S. intelligence collection, right? Take a look at that factoid on the left. Adversaries collect small pieces of information. When combined, they can reveal the whole picture. You can have two pieces, even unclassified information, right? When you combine them, they can become classified. Usually in a smaller setting, I'm not going to do that here, but in a smaller setting, I would ask folks to give me a fact about the sky, right? And then they would say the sky is blue, it's got clouds. They might even give me the different composition of nitrogen and oxygen, if they have the phone ready, right? But why is that important? Why is that analogy important? If I'm a fee, right, and I ask each and every one of you, what do you do on a daily basis? And I ask you, hey, do you mind if I give you $500? Do you mind writing that up, what it is you do on a daily basis? You'd be surprised as to how many people actually do it, right? And again, if I'm a fee and I ask you guys, even something as simple as, hey, what do you do on a daily basis? When I can combine that picture, and I mean, there's about 100 of you here, right? But if I ask 1,000 people, 10,000 people, I can get a much better picture of where things are as far as the Navy, right? As far as politics, whatever it may be. So, again, keep that in mind. Next slide. Espionage, right? More than 70% of those convicted of espionage were citizens aboard the United States. Is anyone shocked about that fact? I was shocked. That's a lot of people, right? That's a huge percentage. So, again, keep in mind, keep some things in mind when we go through the behavioral cues for and later in the presentation. Terrorism, like I said, I'm not going to talk too much about that. Like I said, we do have folks that specifically, this is what they do on a day-to-day basis. They investigate terrorism and self-radicalization. But again, I am a conduit for those folks. Self-radicalization and terrorism, again, those things, the most important thing to remember with these is the fact that most of these folks, their main goal is to create as much violence as they possibly can, right? So again, you don't know whether an individual has been radicalized whilst an event is happening. But if there's an active shooter situation, you better know what you want to do, right? And usually, I'm not going to talk about the active shooter situations here, but again, you don't know what's happening in the moment. Yes, you'll find out later, but you can also, again, look through those behavioral cues 6 to 8 months prior to somebody doing something. Has anyone heard of loose tweets sink fleets? Maybe, right? Social media. Who does not have social media presence here? Don't be shy. 3 or 4 of you, right? Out of 100, that's normal. I think a lot more definitely have social media. Again, social media, not necessarily bad. I'm not telling you to like delete all your social media accounts or whatever, right? Probably a better idea to have good privacy settings, but you'd be surprised to know as to how many of our adversaries are actually trying to recruit folks through social media. In fact, we have seen an uptick in the past 3 to 4 years of specifically that, people using social media, Facebook, LinkedIn, right, stuff like that. Not necessarily Snapchat, but you can actually you'd be surprised as to how many cases I've gotten where people are like, oh yeah, somebody contacted me on Snapchat, and I'm like, that's weird. But again, has anybody heard of Bryce Petticini, Fireman Controlman Chief Bryce Petticini? Does that sound familiar? No. So he was a fire controlman chief out of Yokosuka. He was contacted via social media. Again, was asked to write a white paper on what he does on a day-to-day basis. And then after, I don't remember exactly how many months it was, but he started giving this individual, this foreign intelligence entity, it turns out later, classified documents, right? So again, usually that's how it starts. A lot of these folks try to establish a relationship, and then it kind of snowballs from there. Again, this individual, this fire controlman chief, got paid. I don't remember how much he got paid, but that's what he chose to do. And then he was convicted earlier this year in May, 18 years in prison for espionage. So again, a lot of the adversaries out there are specifically trying to gear or ramp up social media, not necessarily attacks, but again, it's very easy for any fee to look up who works in the military, especially if you have social media like LinkedIn, and then just start to target that way. Workplace violence, again, between 2011 and 2014, over 1,700 people were killed in the United States as a result of workplace violence. That's a lot of people, right? Even though this is kind of an outdated study, that's still a lot of people. I would like for that number to be 0, right? I think we all would. Some of the motivators, right? Seeking revenge or justice, getting notoriety, bringing attention to solve a problem, ending pain, right? And a lot of these folks, whether it's workplace violence, again, it's violence, right? That's what they want. So I also sit with our threat assessment unit. We do have it's called the threat assessment unit, but it functions similarly to the FBI's behavioral analysis unit. If anybody's ever watched Criminal Minds, we do the same exact thing, right? We have had cases in the past where individuals were being stalked. It usually starts off with cyber stalking, and then can escalate to physical stalking, right? So if that's one of those things where, a lot of times you wouldn't really think about involving NCIS with this, but again, if that's something that's happening, we would want to know, because we can provide, at least some help. And if we can't provide any help, then at least we can work with either the Bureau or local law enforcement to provide whatever help we can get. Again, that number is way too high. This was taken straight from the Al-Qaeda handbook. It's a little outdated again. I think this is from 2016-17 timeframe, but it says, using public resources openly and without resorting to illegal means, it is possible to gather at least 80% of information needed about the enemy. That number now probably way higher, probably 90-95%. And again, I'm not saying don't have social media, but whatever you put out on the internet, it will stay there forever, right? Especially, Google. Again, as a terrorist organization, I can gather as much raw data as I possibly can from those, sites, and then I can create a threat package, and then I can just start making my calls, right? Whether it's obviously social media. Again, even at NAVC, I've gotten a lot of folks report getting phone calls on their desk phone numbers, on their government phones, or even their personal phones. And again, personal phones usually mean some sort of fraud. But again, if that's something that we would want to know as well, because we can at least let everybody know, like, hey, this is kind of what's been going on. A few years ago when I was at PAX, we received a bunch of reports. A bunch of military individuals were receiving text messages via WhatsApp, and usually it started off with gruesome photographs or gruesome videos of beheadings and stuff like that. And then the individual would say, I know where you live, I need you to give me $10,000 or something along those lines. Later on, we found out that that was actually a scam. Those individuals did not live in the United States. Those phone numbers came from a foreign country. But again, folks will, or some folks at least will fall for those kinds of scams. So again, if you get something like that, let somebody know, let NCIS know at least, so that way we can try to figure out whether that's legitimate. Obviously, if there's scams out there right now with people finding out where you live via social media, taking a screenshot of like Google Maps or whatever, sending it to your personal phone or email, and then saying, I know where you live, just, again, give me whatever amount of money. So if that's something that you guys come across, let us know. We can at least report that and disseminate it to the rest of the community so that everybody stays safe. Social media bad, right? No, I'm just kidding. Traditional methods, again, this is a little outdated, so this is probably over 100 countries now, both friends and foes target the United States seeking information and technology. That makes sense, right? Especially with places, like I said, I covered Carter Rock, a lot of research goes on there, NAVC, a lot of FMS cases, right, foreign military sales. So there's a lot of information that a lot of these countries want. So again, the point is to be careful who you talk to and report, right? Again, open source, I'm not going to talk too much about that. Talked enough about that. I'm going to skip through some of these slides. Change the next slide, please. Again, at the bottom, you can see there, fees use fake social media profiles to target DO1 members from whom they elicit sensitive information. And again, we have seen an uptick in the past 2 to 3 years where people have been contacted specifically through Facebook and LinkedIn. Yep, that's good. So again, report, right? Why it works, easy, non-threatening, right? We want to be polite. You can skip to that slide. So these elicitation tactics work, right? You can go to the next slide. Again, flattery, appeal to ego, quid pro quo. You can stop there. Some of the subtle defenses to some of these, right, depending on where you go. Has anybody here gone to Sear Space or any one of those events, right? Pretty big events, right? Usually a lot of face-to-face interaction. There's a lot of foreign people that go to those events, right? Not, obviously, you don't know if any of those are fees, which is why NCIS usually supports those types of events. But if you're talking to somebody and then they kind of start asking weird questions, right? These are some of the subtle defenses. Don't allow the other person to talk, listen more, to ask a lot of those questions, to control the conversation. Listen more than you talk, deflect a question with a question, right? You don't have to memorize all these. I think the two, most or three really, not answering obviously works. But being general and non-specific and pleading ignorance always works, right? You can always say, hey, I don't know the answer to that question, but if you give me a business card, I can contact our public affairs office, and maybe they can try to get you information you're asking for. Or you can say, hey, I don't know the answer to that, but why don't you go on the Navy's website and you could probably find that information there too. Again, you're not saying anything out of the ordinary. You're kind of deflecting it like, hey, I don't know anything. Just go out to these public facing websites and kind of figure it out yourself. But again, if you say, hey, you know what, that program is actually very, very classified and I can't talk to you about that, that's a no-no, right? Don't say that. Don't avoid saying anything like that, right? So again, be general, non-specific, pleading ignorance usually works. And again, a lot of these folks, right, a lot of these entities, eavesdropping, electronic surveillance. How many of you guys connect to public Wi-Fi when you travel? Yeah, I would suggest not to. Again, depending on if it's a hotel, different story. Depending on what country you go to. Obviously, if you travel to some of those the higher threat countries out there, we may want to have a conversation just because, one, we want to brief you. Usually NCIS provides foreign travel briefs that can be classified depending on where you go. But we have seen in the past where hotels kind of have listening devices and stuff like that. Again, if you go to Aruba, not that big a deal. If you go to Russia, maybe we'll want to chat, right? So again, a lot of these fees, what they want to do is recruit, right? And usually starts with small requests, then it becomes bigger demands. Go to the next slide. We do have cyber folks that specifically deal with cyber issues. So if you do come across anything cyber related, let an NCIS agent know, and then we can kind of work from there. Usually we like cyber units to kind of do their own thing, or we talk with an IT professional. That way they can at least isolate whatever it is that it may be, right? If you receive an attachment or some sort of suspicious email, you definitely don't want to open any of that. Does anybody know what steganography is or not know? I just learned about this not too long ago. So basically it's a way to hide information within, you could hide information within anything, right? You can hide a classified document within a video, you can hide malware within a PDF file, right? So that's kind of why a lot of these suspicious attachments, how they work, right? You drag and drop to your desktop, and then the thing does what it's supposed to do, which is attack either the system, the network, or whatever it may be. So if you do receive anything suspicious, let somebody know so that they can at least quarantine it, and then working with a cyber professional, not necessarily NCIS at first, because again, we specifically deal with fees, right? If there's a fee, then we might want to get involved. But again, you can isolate that and then kind of go from there. And again, I think the easiest thing to do for this is just practice good OPSEC. Again, if you get something suspicious, let somebody know. Be wary of people you meet online, and if you do meet somebody online, again, LinkedIn, Facebook, whatever it is, let somebody know, especially if those red flags start popping up. So what makes you a target? Circumstance, behavior, characteristics, right? Do I have access to information or means to acquire it? Does my behavior make me stand out? Do I have the personality or characteristics that can be manipulated? And I'll talk a little bit about the characteristics in a bit too. You can change the next slide. Next slide, please. I guess it froze. There we go. Again, placement, access, and culture. So placement, next slide. What kind of access to what kind of information you have, next. And then you'll also be surprised as to how often a lot of these fees specifically target cultural background and ethnicity, right? So, next. 55% of spies volunteered without coercion or recruitment by the adversary. Does that surprise anyone? I'm not necessarily, I am pretty surprised that more than half of the people actually volunteered to commit espionage, right? And again, I talked about Bryce Petticini. Social media contacted, asked to write a bunch of white papers, got paid, and then NCIS eventually found out, and now he's in jail, right? But again, more than half of people volunteered. More than half of the spies volunteered. So again, the characteristics of targets: narcissistic behaviors, antisocial, impulsive, paranoid, vindictive, right? Good thing is that there is more or less a time period where some of these folks are going to exhibit a lot of these behaviors, right? 6 to 8 months. Usually, I would say between 4 to 8 months, right? A lot of folks might start to exhibit some of these behaviors. Next slide. Again, actions or behaviors. Next slide. Disgruntled behavior, right? If somebody displays signs of increased dissatisfaction, that makes sense, right? If somebody's angry all the time, what are they angry about, right? That can be a characteristic or an indicator, right? Divided loyalties. Another one, working odd hours. And again, you could work odd hours, but as long as you have a specific, if you talk with a supervisor or something like that and they're okay with it, then not a big deal. If you're coming in at midnight, taking classified documents, that's a pretty big red flag. Again, unauthorized removal, unauthorized devices, if you mistakenly bring items such as smartphones and USB drives into secured areas, right? Smartwatches, earbuds, anything that has Bluetooth connection, do not bring it into a SCIF. No need to know, right? If somebody does not have access to certain information but is constantly asking for it. All right, you can go to the next one. Unnecessary copying, that's another one, or burning of CDs. Again, unexplained affluences makes purchases to appear to be beyond their means. You could easily win the lotto, right? But if I won the lotto, I probably wouldn't show up to work the next day. But does anybody know who, I don't know if it's on this slide, but his name is Charles Lieber. He was a professor in chemistry with Harvard. Does that name ring a bell to anyone? No? So again, he was a professor of chemistry and biology at Harvard. Turns out that he was contacted by MSS, right? Chinese fee. And then he was asked to basically bring whatever research he had from Harvard to China. And then he was paid, I think, $50,000 a month salary, which is a lot. He was given $1.5 million to start up his own lab in China, and then he was given, I think, $158,000 worth of just expenses so he can buy stuff while he got to China. Again, not necessarily, there's nothing that we can do as NCIS. However, he had a DoD grant, and he was working on classified stuff with the DoD, right? So making purchases to appear to be beyond their means. Again, if somebody's receiving $50,000 a month and their salary really is like, I don't know what a chemistry professor at Harvard gets paid, but it's not $50,000 a month, right? So if they're constantly buying fancy cars or taking fancy vacations or whatever it may be, that could be a red flag. Next one, bragging. Talks excessively about work, right? Narcissistic behavior. If somebody thinks that they can't get caught, they're smarter than everybody else in the room, they might want to get away with it. Does anybody know who Jim Nicholson was? I'm throwing all out these names, and I know. This was actually pretty fascinating. So Jim Nicholson was a case officer with the CIA back in the 80s. And he worked, I guess, with the equivalent of the Russia squad or the KGB squad as it was at the time. Well, he showed up to work to the CIA holiday party, one of the holiday parties, with a T-shirt that said "KGB is for me," and I'm sure everyone thought it was really funny. And then he was caught. He committed espionage for the KGB. So again, I'm sure he thought he was the smartest person in the room, and he was, you know, outwitting everybody else. But again, at the end of the day, he was caught committing espionage. So you will see some of these signs. Next, foreign travel. Anytime you take any foreign travel, anywhere you go, right? You're supposed to let somebody know, security manager, and then at some point NCIS may reach out. Again, depending on where you go. But if folks take unscheduled, unexpected travel, right, or they're coming back and they're talking about how they met a foreign government official, but they're not reporting any of that to security, that's a red flag. Next. So again, you're supposed to report all of that stuff. Anytime you meet a foreign national, report it. Anytime you go anywhere abroad, report that, right? Terrorism, I'm not going to talk too much about that, but you can switch to the next slide. But a lot of these things, right, with terrorism, you will see a lot of the memberships, a lot of the statements, a lot of the publications kind of start to develop a lot more, right? Weapons threats might increase, internet activities might increase too. Again, if somebody is radicalizing themselves, they're going to start going down a rabbit hole, like whether it's, you know, the internet, YouTube, whatever it may be. They might start even talking about that kind of stuff, right? So if they start talking about, hey, I'm very interested in this organization, and it turns out like, yes, this is actually a terrorist group, like that's a pretty big red flag. And again, these folks usually going to start talking about that kind of stuff 6 to 8 months prior to actually committing some sort of event, whether it's espionage related or terrorism related. So again, key stressors. Go to the next slide, please. So again, you will, besides all the actions and behaviors, right, there are certain key stressors. Usually most of these are emotionally charged events, right? Whether it's divorce, breakup, next, death of a loved one, right? That can cause somebody to not necessarily snap, but again, it's a stressor, right? Money problems, financial problems are one of the biggest ones. Relocation, some people love moving. Who here loves moving every few years, right? Not everybody. But again, some people, it can become a huge issue for them. New relationships, that can make it difficult for a lot of people to think logically, right? Again, medical problems, same thing as money problems. Next. And then general unhappiness with the work, right? So again, foreign travel and foreign contact, report all that kind of stuff to whoever your security officer is. As long as somebody knows, that's good, that's what we want, right? And at the end of the day, I can't do my job without you guys reporting that stuff. So, especially if you have a security clearance, NCIS definitely, obviously, not necessarily needs to get involved, but again, if you go to a place like Russia, especially right now, we might want to sit down and be like, hey, this is kind of what to expect if you do decide to go there. So again, just keep that in the back of your mind. Also, again, like I said before, if you have a security clearance, especially if it's DS or work on anything SAP related, obviously you want to report foreign travel there. So you can skip through that. And again, at the end of the day, I'm not going to bombard you with all these OPSEC reminders. You're going to get a ton of these, right? But I think they are important to always kind of think about, right? Especially when it comes to counterintelligence. Again, never bring classified information home. I shouldn't have to tell people that, but you'd be surprised as to how many folks actually do that, right? That's a big no-no. That's a big red flag. Don't talk about anything sensitive outside of in public places or unsecured places, right? And then just limit the information you post on social media, right? And increase your privacy settings. So next. Again, at the end of the day, it's up to you guys. I can't force anybody to do anything, but if you see something, say something, and I'm here. We're all here in the same fight. So that's it. Oh, case studies. Okay, I do have a few case studies. Does anybody remember these two? The Tobys. So Jonathan and Diana Toby. So Jonathan Toby worked for Naval Reactors, and then he was caught trying to sell some of that information to a foreign government, right? So he was trying to sell some of that information in exchange for $100,000 in crypto, right? The FBI intercepted all of that, intercepted the package and all that, right? So these two did get arrested, and now they're both in jail because his wife, I think I don't remember exactly how she helped them, but you can look this case up. NCIS was the case agent, the case agency that worked jointly with the FBI. But again, how many of these behaviors do you think, especially Jonathan Toby, exhibited while he was trying to take classified information from the SCIF home, right? I'm sure somebody noticed it, which is probably how they got caught. Next. Does anybody remember this a few years ago? Yep, right? Again, even though they don't know who did it, they're pretty sure, I think NCIS definitely was involved with this, but we're pretty sure that it was some sort of sabotage with this. But again, 6 to 8 months, somebody must have been exhibiting some sort of behavior, whether it's disgruntled behavior, you know, with a job, with a boss, or something like that, right? Again, $1 billion worth of damages. That's a lot, right? Next. And again, the money aside, obviously you had 63 people that were actually injured with this, so that's a pretty big, again, somebody could have easily, maybe not easily, but again, that's kind of why we're here, so I can bring you some of those. Okay, that may be a red flag, maybe I should tell somebody about this. Charles Lever, as I talked about earlier, chair of Harvard University's Chemistry and Chemical Biology Department. Again, he was receiving DOD funds, and at the end, right, he was getting paid $50,000 a month, living expenses of $158,000 a month, and received $1.5 million to establish a lab, right, in Wuhan University in China, right? And he was actually participating in a 1,000 talent program. Has anybody ever heard of the 1,000 talent program? No. Again, there's a bunch of these talent programs out there, and they're specifically geared towards recruiting not only researchers, right, but military folks as well. So especially pilots, right? That's a pretty big thing now too. So there's plenty of research out there where a lot of these foreign intelligence entities are trying to do that now. So that's it. I think those are all the slides. Yep. Any questions? No? Yes.
TikTok.
Yes.
Can we have it?
Can you have it? Personal phone, government phone, definitely no, right?
Personal account, you can have that.
You can have it. Again, there's no guidance even for us. I know plenty of NCIS agents who have TikTok, but they're not posting that, hey, yes, I'm going to work. This is my government vehicle, right? Everything is private. I suggest not having it just to be on the safe side, but there's no specific, there's no negative for not having it, right? Again, I would suggest not to have, my wife has TikTok, and she's constantly showing me videos left and right, and I'm like, that's great, I can't force you not to have TikTok, but anything else? Cool. Thanks for having me, guys. I really appreciate it. Thanks for staying awake. And like I said, if you do have any questions, you can always reach out to an NCIS agent, and if I can't help you, somebody else definitely will. So thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you again for your
Thank you.
time. We appreciate